are called the Torah, the law. But did you know that the Torah is encoded in amazing ways that are being discovered more and more every day? It's an amazing phenomenon. Richard Shaw, welcome to Prophecy Watchers. We're going to talk about the Torah codes.
Thank you, Gary. It's really great to be here and get to check out your new set, and just everything looks great.
I should add, before we get much further, that Richard is a motion picture producer, has been for a long time, is very gifted when it comes to presenting a story in pictures, and he has presented the Torah codes. And I want you to know, you need to avail yourself of the information in this particular set. In fact, the set contains both a DVD and a Blu-ray playback so that you can get the full fidelity version of Richard's work. Richard, Torah codes. Now, you are someone who shoots pictures, someone who interviews people.
Sure. How
in the world did you ever get into filming the Torah codes or the people behind the Torah codes?
It was very strange, Gary. It just kind of fell into my lap. Years ago, I had a friend of mine, Lee, who actually went on this trip with us to shoot me, since I had to host this particular film. And he walked through my studio, and we just got to talking about the Bible codes one day. And I said, someday I'd like to do a documentary about it, because I find it interesting. We'd read Michael Drosnin's books called The Bible Code. And I just hadn't seen a documentary done where they went to the source, these rabbis and professors that actually do it, instead of picking tables out of Drosnin's books and using those to build a film. I thought, well, why not just go to the source and see what they're doing?
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do. So Lee was busy working on a job for Ricky Lee Jones, a recording artist, and he had to go to Japan. When he came back home a few days later, he jumped on a plane, but to go to New York to visit his brother Paul, and his flight was canceled due to bad weather or some strange thing. So he, a day or two later, JetBlue put him on another flight, and the seat assignment put him next to this guy that looked like a rabbi. And that was Professor Robert Haralick, whose picture is right behind us here. Cue the professor. And
Robert Haralick, by the way, I've heard of his name over the years. That it appears in a number of articles.
Oh, he's a brilliant scientist. He used to work for the Jet Propulsion Labs early on. He was involved in computer imaging. He's an expert on computer color, all of that stuff. But he's also the man who wrote the algorithm to search the Bible codes.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so Lee ends up sitting next to this guy for 5 hours. Lee, knowing that I want to do a documentary about this, they land in LaGuardia, tosses his phone to Professor Haralick, and somehow I'm connected. I didn't have to do anything. It basically just happened. Well, years passed, and we tried to figure out what should the film be about, and we thought maybe at one point it should be about the year 2012. What does the Torah Code say about that? And actually, we did find an incredible bunch of information on 2012 in the Torah Codes. But it wasn't the right time yet. And I think that the father knew that last year there was going to be an altercation with Hamas, and that there would be some very interesting Torah Codes as a result of it. And that's when we finally got the funding to create the film and do it correctly.
The Torah codes, and I've been aware of them over the years. I've read a lot. I've read several books and papers on the subject, but a lot of people got on the bandwagon a few years ago.
Sure.
And they tried to predict the future. Naturally, if you've got some kind of Ouija board that'll tell you the future, every Tom, Dick, and Harry wanted to break into the Torah codes, and it became popular. I recall for a long time, you could buy Torah codes software and sort of do a do-it-yourself search, maybe find your own name or whatever.
Sure.
And I objected to that strenuously because to me, you're talking about the Bible. You're talking about the Word of God. It shouldn't be abused in this way. And I don't think that what's going on in Torah codes research today is abuse, and that comes across in the way you have presented all this.
Well,
I think
you,
the Lord has opened a particular door to the Jewish people in our day.
Well, I agree. The Torah codes aren't to be used like a crystal ball.
Right.
And that's not how they're being used. But they do end up with information about events, people, dates, places that seem to be in our time. We don't understand why that is, but indeed that information is definitely encoded. And concerning using the Torah codes like a crystal ball, Professor Rips, who is known pretty much as the discoverer of the Torah codes, he and two other programmers back in the late 70s really were the ones that have created the possibility that you could search the Torah like we do today. But he wrote a paper that's readily available on the internet saying that he doesn't agree for using the Torah codes as a predictive tool, mostly because we don't have enough information to ask about the future. How do we know that something's going to happen? What words do we search for? And this is what people don't understand. They go, oh, well, look up this word or look up that word, but that's not the way it works. You have to have a group of words that you want to find out information about, and you have to look them all up in advance. It's called a priori. So if I wanted to look up about Gary Stearman, I would need to know personal information about you. I'd need to know the date of birth. I'd need to know your occupation, any amazing things that happened to you in your life that would point out you over some other guy by the name of Gary, because this isn't Google. These are the Torah codes. So then all of those questions would have to be put into modern Hebrew and then searched. So that's the process.
And if something came up, you'd have to interpret it in a particular way.
Right.
And that's hard, too.
Well, that's a great point, because sometimes we looked up the 2012 tables, and when I first met Rabbi Glazerson and Professor Rips, they didn't know what 2012 was, because all they do is study the Torah,
right.
And I said, oh, the Mayan calendar, the end of the world, all of these things. So they started looking up tables, and it said that, end of the world, Mayan calendar in 2012. And also it was a sabbatical year. And all of these really strange codes came up. So it worried them. And so they had a meeting set up with the high rabbi in Jerusalem to get permission to work on this film with me. And he gave them permission. He said, just don't predict when the Messiah is coming. That was the stipulation. I said, well, I'm in total agreement of that, because nobody knows the date or the time when the Messiah is going to appear. So that was kind of a really fascinating thing. But what we discovered by those tables that said end of the world and 2012 and Mayan and all that, it was basically echoing the zeitgeist of the times, what people were talking about, what was written in the literature now about 2012. And that's what all came up in the Torah codes. And now we have a better understanding of those aspects.
What I liked about this DVD Blu-ray, I should say, and it's simply entitled The Torah Codes, what I really got out of it, and when I watch a DVD, I always sort of analyze it, in terms of the information I'm getting, and I sort of privately critique it, how well is this done, and so forth, and I think everybody does.
Sure.
But when I watch the Torah codes, the thing that just blew me away more than anything else, and there are a lot of different things you can see, but what really blew me away personally was to getting the opportunity to meet the men behind the Torah codes.
Right, and we do that on the film.
You interview them very extensively. You have sit-down conversations with them, lengthy conversations in which we get to know the men behind the Torah codes, which I just think is a rare privilege. That's a wonderful thing.
Well, I always feel a bit privileged to know these guys, and to know them this closely and to get emails from them so frequently. They're a real special bunch of men that I love and appreciate at this point. And they all have a niche that they're filling to study these codes. Like Professor Rips, his niche is he comes up with the most astonishing codes I've ever seen, and they're always in complete sentences, unbroken, all with the same ELS skips, equidistant letter sequencing as the code that's the Torah
and he's
used.
a gentleman who has been in this for a long time.
Yes, he has. And we tell a fragment of the story of his life, how he was raised really as an atheist because his family was all killed in Auschwitz. And so he was in Riga as Czechoslovakia was being invaded by the Soviets back in 1968, and decided to set himself on fire to protest. He had nothing to live for, and because they had just been given a little taste of freedom, and now he felt that was going to be yanked out from under them, and he couldn't stand the thought of that. So he wrapped himself in paper soaked in gasoline and walked out into Freedom Square, there where Freedom Monument is, and it has like an angel holding this iconic thing over its head, this really tall obelisk almost, and held out a sign that said, "I protest the invasion, the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia," and then struck a match and started to go up in flames, and horrified onlookers rushed up and put him out, at which point the KGB came and whisked him off to a psychiatric prison where he remained for 2 years. And during that time, his mind was still working. All the gears were still turning up there. And he got to thinking about this formula from the West called the dimension subgroup conjecture. Some really amazing, group theory type of algebraic formula. And on a piece of toilet tissue, using a pencil, he disproved it.
Wow.
Later did his doctoral thesis about it, but did that from prison.
Amazing. Well, that's what I'm talking about, getting to know these very special people. Now, a few months ago, and as you were producing this, Israel was really under open siege. I think everybody remembers the rockets being fired into Israel. Everybody remembers the Iron Dome defense system, and a lot of people talked about miracles that were going on. And a good portion of your Torah Codes DVD tracks some of this. It documents the ways in which the Palestinians have been attacking Israel in the most horrific, surreptitious ways. And it documents some of the miracles of God in defending Israel. And on the table in front of you, I notice you have a piece of twisted metal that you brought back. There's got to be a story behind that.
This is actually, we visited the Sderot police station, where they have racks and racks of hundreds of Qassam and other kind of rockets. And this is an actual piece of it. I mean, if you pick it up, Gary, you can tell it's heavy and sharp and would really hurt you if it hit you.
Yeah, it almost looks like a piece of iron pipe that's been exploded because I can see threads on one end of it.
It actually is. Some of the missiles are built from irrigation pipe that Israel donated to Gaza to help rebuild their agricultural system. And instead they're using that same pipe as bombs.
What a bitter irony that is.
It is.
Yeah.
And in the tunnels underneath the whole Gaza Strip that Hamas built, spending $2 billion on the construction of these really elaborate tunnels, you'll find bags of cement under there that were donated to build homes. Some of them have Israeli stamps on them that Israel donated to help the people, the Palestinians there, rebuild their houses after wars, and they used it for building tunnels. And
in your DVD, you used actual photography that showed what I consider to be a miracle, the miracle of the cornfield, and I don't know how much you want to go into that.
Well, yeah, it was the story of the green wheat.
Ah, green wheat. Yes, I called it corn.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Close enough.
It was this rabbinical thing where they have to harvest their wheat before it ripens because it was going to be a sabbatical year and they had to let the field rest. Well, the only way it would survive is if they harvested it while it was still green. So they came and they did a deal with the farmers there. Look, we want the whole field. We want it all now while it's still green. It's in its perfect state, so that it goes together with all their rabbinical laws of how to harvest this food and prepare it for later. So they did that. Well, what happened a few days later, a dozen terrorists popped up from a tunnel, which what the most shocking thing was, we were walking through one of these fields that had just been harvested. The ground is really powdery. But that they had built a tunnel, Hamas had built a tunnel clear out into the middle of the field. And they were going to use the field as cover so that people wouldn't know that they were coming up to do an attack. And in one of the other cases, Hamas built a tunnel clear up underneath a dining room area at one of the kibbutz little dining rooms there, right on the border. And they had in that tunnel hypodermic needles filled with drugs and dirt bikes, and they were going to capture 50 Israelis through the floor of this dining room, whisk them down into a tunnel, inject them with this drug to knock them out, and then put them on these dirt bikes and drive them several kilometers to the other side and hold them captive. And that all failed because when they popped up out of the tunnel, they were all exposed. There was no wheat field to shelter what they did, and Israel came in and hit them with a missile, and that was that. And it also exposed this tunnel sequence that was much larger than anyone realized.
Now, what we're talking about here is Richard's production. It's called the Torah Codes, and I want to open it for this reason, because it has not only a DVD in it, it also has a Blu-ray disc. And I guess the Blu-ray has more fidelity.
Well, the reason I wanted to do it on Blu-ray in high definition is because we're looking at really elaborate graphics. And in NTSC, regular television, it will look a little fuzzy just because the graphics are really high resolution. So I just felt we needed to do it in high def. So you have your choice.
And if when you order the Torah Codes for $39.95, we're including in part of the package a DVD from Watchers 3, Richard's early investigation of the Torah Codes. So if you have the two of these, you've got sort of his complete works in investigating the Torah Codes and the men who know how to use them. Again, that's $39.95. And that's on our Prophecy Watchers online bookstore, prophecywatchers.com, and we hope you visit that. Now, this is part of the interview that I've been waiting for, because I want to talk to you about the codes themselves. We've talked about the men, the land, the conflict. What about the codes? What's happening in the Torah Codes now?
Well, referring back to what I was saying a bit earlier about the work that Professor Rips is doing, he's finding complete sentences in parallel lines next to each other. We don't understand why that's happening. One of them was one that we put part of in other pieces that we've done, but it's the Bin Laden table. And he discovered all of these words. He says, "I will name you destruction, cursed is Bin Laden, and revenge belongs to the Messiah." Now that is, as best I can remember, it's a 29-letter text, all with the same ELS skip. I mean, it's in there intentionally. It's just kind of mind-boggling. So afterwards, Rabbi Glazerson and others went in and looked at that same table and found other words that were overlapping it, like, surely he will be killed, really astonishing sentences. In the United States, he caused trouble. And down towards the bottom, in the plain text, it just keeps saying, "will be killed, will be killed, will be killed." I mean, it's just like you look at all of the information in that table, and it's like, well, how could that be random chance? Which leads us to another issue. It's like, one thing that hurt the codes for a while was that people could say, well, if you have a powerful enough computer, codes can be found in any text. And that's true.
Like if you picked up a novel, for example, and looked, you might find codes.
That's true.
And that would be sort of the, if you will, the test or the check to make sure that these things are actually valid. And you're saying that you will find.
You will find.
Encoded words.
The difference is, though, is the level of probability and statistical significance of those words aren't anywhere even close to what's found in the Torah. For example, Professor Rips found a few years ago a table on the Twin Towers. And so it says, Twin Towers airplane attack. Now, this was a table that's like one chance in a million that those words would come up in such a small area in the scriptures. And all of those words were found, except for one letter of one word, was found in Numbers chapter 20. And
now, I take it that he didn't find that before the Twin Towers.
no, because he wouldn't have known to put Twin Towers in.
In other
Why
words,
would you do that?
It's not predictive.
No.
It's not like, as you were saying a minute ago, it's not a crystal ball.
Right.
But it's a validation.
It is. So then I asked Professor Herlick, could you look that up in a couple non-encoded texts for us, like random texts, Hebrew texts, so we can see how it looks when the computer finds those same words. And he indeed found all the same words, but one table, I think Professor Ripps's table, the whole total was like 234 characters. And then the random text, it was like 7,700 characters and 4,300 characters. And all the words were there, but they were like kind of all over the page and spread out.
Yeah.
It was not the same.
We're talking with Richard Shaw, a producer of the Torah Codes. He's a gifted photographer, cinematographer. I guess that would be a working term.
Good enough.
He makes very watchable films, let's put it that way. And I love the way he puts things together with music and with cutting from one scene to another that just carries you right along into the story. And you will indeed be edified by this thing. As I said a minute ago, Richard, what really got me was seeing Israel up close and personal in conflict, and then seeing the men who are looking at these Torah codes earnestly. You know, we're living in an era when Israel's been called back into the land. And I, for one, believe that is a fulfillment of prophecy. And from the Bible, we know that some very significant events are just ahead for the nation Israel. Do you get the sense that these men of the Torah Codes have that same feeling?
I have never seen such a fervor as I have the past 6 months of all these men looking for any indication that the Messiah is near than I have lately.
That's their preoccupation, the Messiah.
They're really preoccupied with finding codes about the Messiah, and they have indeed found a lot. And they have a lot of tables that seem quite significant for the years 2015 and 2016, although they're not making any predictions.
Sure.
There seem to be a lot of tables that come up within the next 2 years. Of course, we have the eclipse, the solar eclipse, and the two blood moons this year, which is also unexplainable. And Joel says the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon will into blood in the day of the Lord. So it's like, well, that's kind of what's going on this year.
Yeah, it's happening.
We can't explain it, or what that means, or what that's instigating, or what it signifies. But with all of the Torah codes that are coming out with the word Messiah in them, there was a little table that Rabbi Glazerson found that, says Messiah, son of David, son of Joseph in there. And of course, they're not even looking at it from a Christian perspective, and yet they find that in the Torah codes. So it's very interesting, I think.
So would it be fair to say that they're excited about the times?
Yes. In fact, while there's all of this dire information that the world's about to go to hell in a handbasket, essentially, the rabbis and professors are finding joy, Messiah, the return, and all of these kind of issues, which is they're trying to turn it around a little bit. We're waiting for this person to come rescue us from all of our troubles.
And these men have begun as mathematicians, physicists, brilliant men.
Brilliant.
Who didn't necessarily believe in God's mandate for Israel. They may have had some concept of it, but they were not really what you'd call religious Jews in the beginning, from the way you've described them.
No, especially Professor Rips. And when he finally was brought to Israel, when a few mathematicians got together and brought him to Israel, and he became interested, he had never seen all of this rabbinical fervor before about Judaic writings. So he started studying the Torah, and then he realized that the Torah was a book of miracles. I love the way he puts this. I always just get a little teary-eyed when he explains it, and even while editing it, I had trouble doing it without, in some cases, almost breaking down, because he's so he has such a pure heart. He's such a kind-hearted, humble, and incredibly brilliant genius-level guy. And he realized that as a scientist, he was finding all of these miracles, and he had to somehow prove that that was either correct or not. So he thought, how much better to find those miracles by looking in the book that reports these miracles.
Now,
And that's how we started getting interested in the codes.
we're coming down to the last couple of minutes. I've been saving this for last. What do you find the most exciting thing in the Torah Codes DVD Blu-ray? What's for you is the sort of the peak incident here?
There's several tables that I think are really, really neat. But there was a terrorist attack that was apparently predicted in the Torah codes that was kind of found randomly by several of the professors and rabbis. Professor Rips found this phrase, mega terror. And
Mega terror. Now that's amazing.
Mega terror. It's not hardly even a Hebrew word. He had to look hard to find that. And then one of the other professors found the same idea that said mega attack, and it was like close to mega terror. It was like that. So then they thought, that's unusual, and we need to pray. So Professor Daniel Michelson went to the Wailing Wall and started praying about it. Well, the word a prayer is in the Torah code table. The word kotel for the Wailing Wall is in the Torah code table, and for Israel is in there. So it's like praying for mercy for Israel at the wall. That's what he did. All of those words are like almost touching each other for this mega terror attack. And then sure enough, they found a date in there. It was like the 10th of Elul, which was in August in that year. And the police found some terrorists in Tel Aviv were going to blow up a tanker truck. And later, Professor Rips went back into the same table, and along the top it says, they will be arrested.
Wow. Amazing. You're listening to Richard Shaw. He's produced the Torah Codes, and in this production, you're going to discover how the Torah Codes really work. That is to say, you'll see these tables, that is, layouts, horizontal, vertical words that sometimes intersect each other, sometimes touch. You learn all about that in the DVD and Blu-ray that we're offering, plus the bonus Watchers 3, which goes back a few years, right?
It does.
To the
Shows some of our earliest work, also with Dan Gordon.
It's very much worthwhile to watch this. And Richard, I want to thank you for sharing with us today, bringing this horrific piece of memorabilia. The war goes on in Israel right now, and shards of rocket material are being still on the ground over there. Wow.
And we show how they're having to live under those conditions.
Thanks a lot. I'm Gary Stearman. Keep watching, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. Or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Hello again, Saints. I want to thank everyone for joining us for another Romans chapter 11 survey. In Romans chapter 11, this is the end of the chapter. This is the review also. But we are looking at
The 5 books of Moses are called the Torah, the law. But did you know that the Torah is encoded in The 5 books of Moses are called the Torah, the law. But did you know that the Torah is encoded in amazing ways that are being discovered more and more every day? It's an amazing